Hey guys, how are we doing? I am here to go over our Macromolecules 1 lecture. There are two different lectures and two different packets, Macromolecules 1 and then 2. So we're going to go over 1 today. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay. So let's come here. We're going to go over this pre-lecture assignment, and as always, if you have not completed it yet, please stop here and go back and do that for me, so that you're comfortable with what we're talking about, because this particular pre-lecture assignment introduces a lot of information. Okay, so let's go ahead and move through this. First off, let's talk about organic molecules. Organic molecules all contain the elements carbon. That's actually the backbone for organic molecules. It's extremely important. Anything that's considered organic has it. We're carbon-based, okay? And then it also contains hydrogen. All right, there's 4 categories of organic molecules that we will talk about. We've got carbs. I'm not gonna write out carbohydrates because it's long, but carbs, proteins, lipids, and nucleic acids. Okay, so before we get into kind of what macromolecules do for us in our body, I want to talk first about a couple of vocabulary terms that are not included in your text, which frankly is dumb because they need to be. You need to know these. So make sure that you pay attention to this. When you're building a macromolecule, you're taking a bunch of smaller parts and putting it in together into a big one. That's what macro means, right? Big. So those small individual parts are called monomers. Look at the root mono, meaning like one or single, okay? So a monomer is an individual building block. Think of like a block, okay? When you link monomers together, you get polymers, poly meaning many, okay? So this is when you have many monomers strung together. So if a single block is a monomer, okay, then when you link those blocks together, you have polymers, okay? And as you link polymers together, you get your macromolecule, okay? All right, so here's those terms, monomer, polymer, and I've been talking about linking them together. But how does that actually happen? What is this link? Okay, so here I'm showing bonds in between our monomers to make a polymer. Okay, so the way that this happens is through a process called a dehydration reaction. Dehydration, you know, means like losing water, right? Or to take away water. And that's what's happening. A dehydration reaction builds polymers by removing a water molecule. Okay. And when it removes the water molecule, it lets those monomers hook together. So look right here at this image for me. Notice that here I've got a bunch of monomers. This is a monomer, 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 okay? I've got monomers, and I want to join these 2 subunits. I want to join those 2 together, those 2 monomers. Hook them together so that I have one big uninterrupted string. Well, at the end of these monomers, we have usually a hydroxide on one side and a hydrogen on the other. Well, when you take those out and put them together, you get H2O. You can see the H's, right? H2 and then O, and that makes water. Hence the dehydration reaction. We're going to take those out, let them join together to create water, and now there's nothing in the way from these 2 monomers joining into a polymer, which you can see has happened here. Okay, so again, that process of building a polymer by linking monomers together is done through the dehydration reaction. The opposite of that is a hydrolysis reaction. Hydrolysis literally means splitting water or breaking water. And that's what you're going to do, because here we have the water molecule right here. We're going to break it down again into its two parts, back to our hydroxide ion, back to our hydrogen. And we're going to stick those back in between where our polymer has joined. So we're going to put it right back in here. When we do that, this goes back to being two separate monomers, okay? So water, if you notice, is the underlying theme here, and it's in both of these reactions. The dehydration reaction to build the polymer, the hydrolysis reaction to break the polymer, okay? All right. You can probably hear my kids in the background. I apologize, but you know, hey, this is COVID life, right? Should I add a hashtag to that? Hashtag COVID life. So let's go ahead with the rest of this page. Let's talk about kind of our levels of carbohydrates. So a carbohydrate is our great big macromolecule. It's made through a bunch of polymer subunits put together. We add a bunch of the polymers together to make a big macromolecule, okay? But when it comes to our simplest form here of sugar, we're going to talk about something called a there's one again, monosaccharide. Okay, so mono meaning one, and here's our kind of root word here for sugar. Single sugar is a monosaccharide. It is a monomer. Okay, so it's kind of convenient to remember. A monosaccharide is a monomer when it comes to our building blocks. Glucose is the type of monosaccharide that our body uses as an immediate fuel source. There's lots of different types of monosaccharides, but this is the one that our body uses and processes most readily and easily as an energy source. Then we have a more complex sugar called a disaccharide, di meaning two. A disaccharide is made when you hook two monosaccharides together. And obviously you're going to do that through our dehydration reaction, right? We want to hook these subunits together. We need to pull that molecule of water out of the way so that they can do that. So that's our dehydration reaction. Hydration, I can spell. Okay. So examples of this, of a disaccharide, include lactose and sucrose. I'm going to pull up my whiteboard here for just a second. Okay. So when it comes to, I'm going to type this. When it comes to a monosaccharide, some examples are glucose, galactose, maltose, okay. Fructose is another one. These are all monosaccharides, okay? So they're the basic monomers that we're going to make all the other sugars out of by connecting them. Then we have our disaccharides. An example of that is sucrose, which is table sugar. We get that by adding glucose and fructose together. We have lactose, which is the sugar that's naturally found in milk. That's made through glucose and galactose. We have all these different combinations that give us our disaccharides. Okay, we'll get into polysaccharides here in just a minute. Let me switch back over. So that's the end of the pre-lecture assignment. Let's kind of move forward. All right, so there is a video here you can watch, how sugar affects the brain. It's actually super interesting. And then there's the question, should sugar be regulated? That's been a huge topic for a while. A lot of you probably grew up with having, well, it's probably more in California. I grew up in California. And before I left California, they'd had a lot of political action that had restricted the types of foods that could legally be sold in vending machines and like school campuses. So it was reducing how much sugar. California also for a while did not sell like super large sizes. You couldn't go into a 7-Eleven or like a Maverick or something like that and get a large size. I believe New York State still does that, or at least New York City still does that. So it's a relevant topic. Should you be allowed, or should we be allowed to regulate sugar? Okay, so watch that and how to get that set up. See what you think. See what your thoughts about this are. Okay, so let's continue. We talked about monosaccharides and disaccharides. Now let's continue with polysaccharides. Polysaccharides are polymers. Okay, again, we're stringing long chains of polymers together. Those polymers are glucose. So we get lots of glucose monomers and just hook them all together, and then we hook those polymers together, and we eventually end up with this massive polysaccharide. Polysaccharides are a source of energy storage for both plants and animals, okay, including us. So in plants, these are stored as starch. So like, here's potato. Potatoes are awesome because they are essentially nothing more than polysaccharide storage, okay? They're packed with carbs, and that's what's showing you here in this kind of micrograph. It's showing you the close-up cells in a potato that are just crammed with starch, okay? And then we have something called glycogen. And glycogen you find in animals and humans. Okay, so glycogen is stored in a couple of places. Most of it is in the liver because glycogen is converted to glucose and back and forth, and that's the liver's job for that particular function. So stored in the liver and some in the muscles. And in the muscles, obviously it's going to be there for kind of an immediate source of energy. So it's where most of our movement comes from, right? It's from our muscles. Okay, so in addition to these storage processes, polysaccharides also can provide structure. They provide structure in the form of something called cellulose, not cellulite, cellulose. Cellulose is the most common polysaccharide on Earth. It's most abundant, and it actually is what forms the cell walls of plants. Okay. Forms the cell walls of plants. This is what we consider fiber. When we're talking about fiber for healthy digestion, it's this. Humans and most animals cannot digest cellulose. We lack the enzyme to break it down. If we don't have an enzyme for it, it means it kind of just sits there. In the case of cellulose or fiber that we consume, it is roughage truly in the sense that when you ingest it, it kind of, I'm trying to think of a non-disgusting way to say it, but I don't think there is one. It kind of acts as a cleaning system for your intestines. Because it's the roughage, it doesn't get digested, and it kind of just scrapes all the crud off from the inside of your intestines to keep stuff from getting clogged. So again, most animals and humans cannot digest it. Why can't your digestive system absorb cellulose? Like I said, you lack the enzyme to break it down. Okay. What about cows and sheep and other ruminating or grazing animals? They eat that, right? They eat grass. So the thing with them, they're actually not breaking cellulose down on their own. They don't have the enzyme to do it either. What they do have are microorganisms, bacteria, that live in their gut. And it's actually those microorganisms that are breaking down the cellulose for them. The byproduct of the bacteria releasing that is methane gas, okay? Which the animals then release as methane gas. All right, so looking at this question of the day, where do fruit smiles go when you eat them? I don't love fruit smiles myself. I kind of like the Welch's version of fruit snacks, but you know, to each his own. But basically it's asking what happens here. Well, when you eat them, the fruit smiles are essentially a mix of macromolecules, mostly carbohydrates, okay? So when you eat them, your digestive system breaks them down through hydrolysis. I'm just gonna say broken down through hydrolysis. Okay, and then from there, they're going to be used to provide fuel, okay, for energy, for the energy production. Excess gets stored in the liver as glycogen, okay? All right. Let's see if we can move on to the next page here. All right, let's look at lipids. So lipids share a couple of common features. They are hydrophobic, meaning if you remember, they do not like water. They are hydrophobic, and they are non-polar. Both of those things mean that lipids don't dissolve in water. Okay, water can't break it down. There are three types of lipids, and they each have their own unique function. So the first is a group called triglycerides. Like I have to mouth it so I can spell it, sound it out. Triglycerides. Okay. Triglycerides are basically used for energy consumption. We break them down for energy. Then you have phospholipids, which is the phospho part indicates they're phosphates and lipids together. These are used for usually cell membranes. And then finally we have steroids. Steroids are hormones. They're building blocks for hormones and cholesterol, things like that, okay? So when we talk about triglycerides in a little bit more detail, we can say that they are really for long-term energy storage. So our body holds on to them well to be broken down when needed for energy. Their construction is a molecule that has 3 fatty acid chains attached. So you can see examples of them down here. Okay, so here's our glycerol molecule, and attached to our glycerol molecule, we have our fatty acids, okay? Hydrocarbons are really what make these guys up. Hydrocarbons are quite simply made up of hydrogen and carbon. That means that you normally see something like this. You see this carbon backbone with lots of hydrogens hanging off of it. Okay, that's a hydrocarbon. All right, so it's made up of hydrocarbons, and then this is all attached to the glycerol molecule through a dehydration reaction to remove the water. A second, let me, what do I want to clear? Erase a little bit. Okay, all right. So attached to glycerol via dehydration reaction. Okay. You'll notice here that they have highlighted the atoms that are going to be used in this dehydration reaction. They're right there. So again, as you take them off, it allows these to link together without problem. So the oxygen from our glycerol combines neatly with our carbon from our fatty acid tail, and now we have one big molecule, it's triglyceride, okay? Similarly, we can break our triglycerides down by reinserting our water right here. That's going to break the glycerol and the triglycerides apart, and we end up with this configuration again. Okay? Okay. Next page. Maybe. Okay. So I'm actually going to stop our lecture here for a minute so that it doesn't get crazy long, and then I'll post the other half of this macromolecules one.